in a world where trauma is real, where people seek out distraction from their internal lives and relationships with others, and where no one is taught healthy self-care. Help was needed. In 2019, the mission began. Find a way to help people understand and better their mental health. Seek out ways to explore relationships and how they work. Fight against the stigmas that surround counseling and therapy. And, most importantly,
do all of that so you don't have to be a therapist to understand it. Hey everybody. Welcome to Season 2 of Therapist Theater. I'm your host, Josh Treese. I'm a practicing therapist in Music City, USA, and every week a guest therapist, counselor, or social worker joins me here in the theater to talk about a movie that we've seen and what relationships or mental health issues it highlights. This week's guest is Leah Lennox. Leah is a counselor in Nashville where she works primarily with children and adolescents in both individual and family contexts. She also provides trauma-informed trainings for teachers across Middle Tennessee to help educators meet the developmental and emotional needs of children from hard places. Thanks so much for downloading today's show. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. And while you're doing that, help other people find the show by giving it a 5-star rating and writing a review for it in the podcast app. Rich city folks live in fancy apartments, but their air is so polluted they can't even see the stars. We'd have to be out of our minds to dim the lights, raise the curtain, and start the previews. Welcome to the theater. Leah.
Hi.
Welcome to the theater.
Thank you.
I like to start every conversation by asking my guests, why therapy? Why do you do what you do?
Yes, that is a loaded question. I think I thought about that. I thought about that a lot because they ask us that in school. And my answer is always, I feel like my profession chose me. And I feel like this wasn't always good growing up, but I feel like I was always a therapist. Now I just get paid for it. I just, from a young age, always kind of got put in the helper role.
Which we were talking Enneagram a little before we started.
Yes.
And you said 2, so
yes.
that makes sense.
Yes, I'm a textbook 2.
Yeah.
So I've always gotten put in that role. Almost like if you were to ask someone like, why are you a singer? And a lot of people will say, oh, I've been singing since I was a kid. I feel like I've been doing therapy since I was a kid and didn't realize I was doing it. So I think that's why I chose that. And then working with kids, I feel like on a subconscious level, not to throw too many therapy terms around, but I feel like I am who I needed when I was a kid.
Oh.
Yes.
Yeah. When did that realization hit?
That is such a good question. When did I notice that?
How did you get introduced to the concept of therapy? Like, did you ever go see a therapist as a kid? Or?
No. I don't think it was common. I mean, I'm not too old. I'm 34. But I didn't even know that was an option. I don't think I even thought about what therapy would be like. And I think if you were to ask me if I was like younger about that, I probably would have had that picture of what some of us have of like, oh, I sit on the couch and talk about my feelings. And it's interesting how sometimes parents will still like have that view for their kids.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll explain,
which I
like,
think is based off of TV and movies.
yes,
And, like,
yeah,
just seeing something in pop culture that shows it.
yeah.
You know?
So I do a lot of explaining on the front end to parents, like, that we play, and they'll get like, what do you mean you're playing? Like, what are you doing in there? You're just playing? So just explaining, no, like, play is actually going to work for a kiddo. And their toys are their words. And so it's actually a lot of work for a child.
So how did you come awake to that maybe this is what you needed?
Yeah. It actually took going to therapy on my part too, as an adult. And I don't think they encourage that enough in like a program, a grad school program. Everyone would be like, oh, you should go. And self-care, and they would use that buzzword, and I was like, self-care, what the heck does that even mean? So it wasn't until being in the field for, I would say,
which
like
also makes sense for it too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Self-care. Yeah. I have needs. What?
Focus on me.
Yeah. So it was probably like a year or two in the, after grad school, and I was working in community mental health, actually doing school-based therapy, and just the kid stories were getting to me, and I was just like, okay, I think it's time I do some work on myself. And so I think it was probably like, it wasn't one time like, oh, this is why I chose it, and I needed me. I think it was like a gradual learning of that and recognizing that.
So you said that as you were kind of growing up that it feels like you were already doing therapy. I think what I'm hearing from that is that you cared a lot about those around you, and that you did your best to listen, be there, that kind of thing. What kind of made you come alive to, oh, I could do this as a job? Like, how did you get to there?
Yeah, I think actually a roundabout way. It's kind of funny, but I was working, my undergrad is in business, and then I was working in New York in doing fashion merchandising. And I always say, and I know this is not the main movie we're talking about, but my experience was like The Devil Wears Prada. Just
who were you in that movie?
Yes. I forget the character's name, but
were you Meryl Streep?
No, I was the one going, I do not like this. I was like, that, it definitely did not make me come alive at all. And then I just kind of thought, like, I have like no more dreams left. don't know what I want to do. I just know I don't like this. And I think it was through a series of, again, it wasn't like a one time, oh, I should do this. I was like, I just thought like I could be good at this. And I literally started Googling counseling schools, and Lipscomb came up, and then a school in Texas. I knew I wanted to move to the South. And I was
Where are you from?
I'm originally from New York.
Oh,
yeah.
Nice. In the city or?
Right outside the city.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you had been doing fashion, and you were like, this doesn't feel like it fits well. No fashion pun intended.
Yeah.
And so you started Googling.
Yeah.
You found Lipscomb.
Yeah, I found Lipscomb.
Huh.
Yeah. And it was either moving to Nashville or moving to Texas. And I have some family here, so I was like, maybe that's probably good to know somebody. But I always like to tell people, I moved to Nashville before it was cool.
Oh.
Before it was the it city.
I'm curious to know, since you didn't see a therapist as a kid, I feel like this job is easily misunderstood unless you have it put in front of you. So, like, how did you even think to Google that?
Yeah.
What was it that made you go, maybe that?
I think it was also, and I can't even tell you the title of the book, but I think it was also a book that I had read, and it was a teen that was struggling. So I think I also read it in books of people going to therapy, and it could have been movies. Yeah, I don't.
So you had some kind of shape of a concept.
Yes.
Even if it was like headlights and fog, you were like, all right, I can kind of see maybe that's.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think it just being the two, like on the Enneagram, like I just helping comes so natural. Like it feels like almost like breathing, like because it's just so natural. And I knew like that therapy meant, I know there's more to it than that, but my knowledge at the time was, okay, I know I could help people.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of before I started seeing a therapist as a client myself, I don't think I had enough of I don't think I knew enough about what they did. I knew Frasier. I had a couple of pop culture kind of examples, but all of them ended up they didn't do what I do now. Frasier hosted a radio show, and I guess maybe Billy Crystal in those analyzed that movies, and then what's her face from The Sopranos. I guess those are kind of the same, but I think for me it was I didn't really know what it was till I went.
Yeah.
Till I needed it, and then and really it was meeting with my mentor and asking him for help, and him sending me. It wasn't even I went to look for a therapist. I was I told my mentor hey, I need help with something. And he's I got a guy. Let me send you to him. But it's always interesting to me to hear, and really one of the missions of the show is to try to break down those stigmas and ideas about what a therapist is and isn't. And that's why I end up asking questions tell me something that your client taught you, or even the why therapy. Because I think that, sometimes it's easy to think that therapists are white coats that talk at you and write on a clipboard and then leave. And
what I love about this generation that's coming up, because I work with a lot of teens too, and they're my favorite, because I feel like this generation is really going to break the stigma. I had a client recently that they wanted to meet with a friend after school, and both her and her friend were like, oh, I can't do that day because I'm going to my therapist after school.
Nice.
So it's much more common. And when they told me that comment, I was just thinking back to high school. I'm I don't think anyone would have said, oh, I can't after school, I'm going to my therapist.
Yeah.
Mainly because they weren't going.
Yeah,
mainly because they probably weren't going, and if they were, I don't know if they would have felt comfortable.
Yeah.
But I feel for them, which is so cool, and I hope we get there with therapy for all ages, but I would love it to be oh, I'm going to therapy, like you said, oh, I went to the gym. It's just so common.
Yeah, and I do think that, self-care is kind of a buzz term right now, but I think that true self-care that's not just the Parks and Rec kind where you splurge and buy stuff, is growing in its meaning to really hone in on the interior. Not just, which this is good, but not just I need sleep, or I need to eat, or I need to exercise, but it really is I need to talk about my feelings, and I need to figure out, why do I have this hang up on this, and why do I keep seeking out unhealthy relationships and things like that. That's cool.
Yeah.
So let's talk about a movie.
Yeah.
What movie did you bring for us to talk about?
I picked The Glass Castle.
The Glass Castle. I don't think I'd ever heard of this until, a couple of guests ago told me they had picked the movie Her, Melanie Rogers did, and she had mentioned she had been thinking about others, and she said she'd been thinking about this one too. So that was really the first time I had heard about it.
Yeah.
So I watched it this morning at 5:30, and I rented it on iTunes last night, and before I went to bed, I got it set up so that when I got up, I could just hit play. And there's been a couple of times where schedule-wise, it's just worked out where I just need to watch it the morning of, and this was one. And I checked how long it was and stuff. And then when I went upstairs to get in the bed, I told Leanne, I was like, can you try to explain to me why it is that every time I wait to watch a movie for the morning of, that it's over 2 hours long?
That's
And there's no commonality between the types of movie. It's just kind of the roll of the dice thing that it just works out that it's always over 2 hours. And there's also been like all of them but one, and I think it was the one I did last week, have always been like intense. Like, this movie messed me up this morning.
yeah. Sorry about that.
Leanne came downstairs and she was like, are you okay? I was like, yeah. What do you need? I need to stop watching these movies in the morning first thing. What is it about this movie that made you want to pick it?
Yes. I would say I'm a book person over movies. So I picked that one because I had read that book a while ago. I forget when it first came out, the book. And then when I saw it was a movie, I was like, ooh, that'd be interesting. And I would love to compare the two. And I love true stories. I always joke, I'm like, I don't know what it is, but I can't read fiction. I know it's kind of weird. Most people like to get lost in fiction, but I just love that it's based on a true story. And I love the main character, the little girl in the movie. I just think she's so resilient. So I just love the story.
How did the movie stack up to the book?
It's been a while since I read the book, so it's hard to remember everything, but I think they did a pretty good job. I think it was like, I know a lot of people say the book is always better, but I think it stayed pretty true to the book.
Okay. So like, what is it about the main character's name is Jeanette? What is it about her story?
Yeah.
That like sucks you in, or that you can take something out of?
Yeah. I think the main thing that sucks you in and is she, and I don't want to give it away too much if people want to watch this movie.
Well, I have said many times on the show, because especially the oldest movie we covered was Terms of Endearment, which was like 84 or something like that. And so I feel like if literally the name of the movie is in the title of the show. So like if you hit play on this, then it's fair game.
Okay.
Like, so I think we can do spoilers. That's fine.
Yeah. So I think, I just love how it opens, and she is walking down, I think it's like Park Avenue in New York, which is a really fancy area in New York. And she spots her parents, and they're like homeless, and they're digging out of the garbage. And I'm just like, what? Like, and just, so that kind of opens up where you kind of see her life, and has a career and is, successful. And then you just see this, scene where her parents are homeless and searching for food. And so that intrigued me of like, oh, I want to know how you got to where you got with what you were given in the beginning. And obviously in the book, when I read the book, I wasn't a therapist yet, but now looking back, I'm even more intrigued, because I'm big into like attachment theory and how our early attachments kind of shape how we view ourselves and others, and how we tend to be in relationships when we're older. So the movie, I just wanted to know more about her life and, again, how she got where she did. I just think it's a fascinating story.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that when we meet her, she already has her job at the paper writing, is it an advice column?
Yes.
Something like that?
Yeah, she was writing in like a gossip column.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the movie throughout the entire story is flashing from present day to her growing up. So you get scenes of her at different ages as she's growing up.
Yeah.
And I think what's interesting is you see the process of her really learning to differentiate and eventually break off from the family. And there is lots of attachment stuff. I think there's also so much trauma.
Yes.
And like invasive and abandonment trauma. Sometimes from the same person.
Yeah, and there's the one scene where when she asks her mom for she's hungry, and her mom's like, "Oh, wouldn't you rather me paint than eat?"
Yeah, her mom actually said something like, the food would only fill you up for a couple of hours, but this painting will last forever.
Yes.
Wouldn't you rather have something that lasts forever? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and then she goes to the kitchen and makes hot dogs and ends up catching herself on fire because the stove. And in the movie, I mean, this is still bad. In the movie, she looks about 6, I would say. But really, I went back and looked into that a little bit more. She's actually, and that's a true story. She was actually 3 at the time. Yeah.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
How does a 3-year-old know how to cook hot dogs?
Yeah.
Sheesh.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she was using what looked like was a big stock pot that you would make like a big amount of soup or stew in. Very high pot.
Yeah.
She was on a step stool, and it was a gas stove, so there was a flame under the burner. And as she was leaning over to and she had I don't know what you call them, like a campfire fork, like a really long kind of 2-prong thing on the end.
Yeah.
So she was like stirring, and you saw like the edges of her little tiny dress kind of brushing towards the fire. And then, the camera's back out on Mom painting, and you hear her scream and drop down on the ground, and she's completely on fire. And Mom grabbed the rug and, put it out. But yeah. Parentification. I mean, like taking a kid having to grow up and assume responsibility much sooner than what is
and
natural.
And what developmentally like they're capable of.
Yeah. So tell me more about because the movie has so much.
Yeah, so much.
So just kind of I think working with kids yourself.
Yeah. What
would you do with this kid?
Yeah.
What did you see?
Yeah, it is a lot. And I think what really stuck out too, and, that's definitely an extreme case, like getting caught on fire as you're cooking. But I've worked a lot in the foster care world and working with kiddos that didn't get what they need in major areas with food. That's a huge issue for kids in foster care. A lot of times they'll hoard food or they'll steal food, and I work with parents and they're like, "Well, I don't get it. We have food. They're stealing food."
Like parents that the foster kid has been adopted by, or maybe their foster parents.
Yes. Yeah, adopted by, or they've been removed from the situation, and so they'll be confused of like, "Well, we have food. They know we have food." But what a lot of people don't know is that if you are ever, I know we kind of joke about like being hangry, and it's a real thing. But if you are ever truly hungry and you went without food for too long, your brain never forgets that.
Yeah.
Where thirst, you can be thirsty, and once that need is met, your brain forgets, but your brain never forgets being hungry. So a lot of our kiddos that are from hard places, they have a lot of issues with food, just because their brain still fears it.
Yeah. I mean, what do you, obviously you probably tell those parents that. Do you ever recommend that they let the kid keep food in their room?
Yeah, we do. So one of the things that you can do is just recommend that they have like a visual of it. Even if a lot of times it's just that comfort of like having a snack in their pocket. And that can help. And then I know food in the room can with like ants and stuff, but I think if it's like secure and, but where they know they can get it if they need.
I'm imagining that that's, like a feeling of control that they would have, like a feeling of I have the ability at any time that I want
Yeah.
to access this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking of like individually wrapped stuff, like the snack things of chips or
Yeah.
Nutri-Grain bars or something.
Yeah.
And even if there's a shelf in the room, like,
Yeah.
you can keep as much as you like. I think because it would be easy for me to imagine that a parent with good intentions could almost, I guess, shame a kid into like, no, that's not what we do. We've got food in there. We don't eat in the bedroom or something like that, where, you know, I think they would be hoping to communicate, no, you got as much as you need, but
Yeah.
it's not understanding the context.
Yeah. And once that need is met, we see a decrease in the stealing behavior, because a lot of those behaviors are just out of like fear of not getting what you need.
Yeah. And it's through the recovery from her burn that we meet the rest of the family.
Mm-hmm.
And like when I rented the movie on iTunes, they have a little brief description of the plot, and in that it talks about her dad, like I can't remember how they described him, but like fantastical and imaginative and blah blah blah, and like he just kind of like blows into the hospital room like a hurricane, like taking over everything. You don't even see them at first, you hear them howling from down the hall, and that becomes a thing, like that they do. Like I think even tiny Jeanette says to the doctor, oh, that's how mountain wolves call their young or something, you know.
Yeah.
But he comes in, and that's how we meet him. And I think at best you could say that he's a force of chaos. Yeah. What did you see there?
Yeah, the dad is definitely interesting. But in a lot of ways too, if we the movie goes on to show that he does have a drinking problem. But it's interesting because I feel like in a lot of ways, her dad almost gave her more of what she needed than her mom did. It seems like the dad, he tended to be more available, even though it might have, some of his ways of being available might have been a little outlandish, but
he felt more like on the level of a peer with them than
Yeah.
a dad.
Yeah. But she, at the same time, she did get connection from him, where I think based on the food scene, it seems like the mom really struggled to meet any of her needs.
Yeah, I think especially when mom got into, I guess, painting mode or something, it was almost like, you know, I'm not stopping.
Yeah.
This is the most important thing, which not even that great of a painter, at least in the movie.
Yeah.
Like, you're not Da Vinci. You're not creating these masterpieces. So like, give your kid a hot dog.
Yeah.
I think that I really struggled with this movie because of this mix of abandon and invasive trauma that was coming from the parents, with sprinkles coming from the grandma. Which, I mean, that's another thing, is we could talk about trauma legacy, because I think that grandma traumatized dad and it got passed down. But you know, I think most people think of trauma just in terms of invasive things that happen to someone that should not have happened. Abandonment trauma is stuff that did not happen that should have happened. And, you know, I think that the earliest example that we see of this was either in the hospital room or just out of the hospital room, where the kids were, I think it was in the car when they were leaving, but they were given books. And then young Jeanette says something like, the doctor said that we should be going to regular school and not just reading books. And, you know, mom and dad don't like that. They kind of take offense to that. And I don't know if we know why in that moment, but we find out later it's because they're homeless. Like, they're living out of their car, you know, at the time. And they leave the hospital and just sleep in a field in the desert, like looking up. But there's all kinds of examples throughout the movie of the kids just not getting basic needs met, like education, food. But I think the biggest example is like stability.
Yeah.
They are just constantly
Moving and
getting pulled up and taken, and not even like down the street, state to state. They go to Texas at one point, Virginia at one point, Nevada. Like they're just all over, almost as if they're running from something, which I don't think I remember Dad trying to run away from something so much as trying to run to. Which maybe that's similar.
yeah.
You know.
And then the title, like the glass castle, he keeps promising her that he's going to build that for her.
Which was really like he wanted to build an entire house out of glass. I think so that they didn't need electric light. I think that was where that was, because he talks about solar panels every now and then, but he also for the whole movie is like drawing a blueprint of it, adding to it. At one point asking his wife to take the wheel while he's driving so he can sketch out a spiral staircase made of glass for her. So I mean, I don't know if that is a story that he's telling himself or if he really thinks that he's going to build that. I can't tell.
Yeah.
I can't tell what the line between fantasy and reality is for him.
Yeah. And I don't know if he can tell.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that imagination can be an awesome strength as a parent especially when they're little and it's fun to imagine with them. But on the other hand, he had trouble like being the adult.
Did you see The Greatest Showman?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
So I mean, those two characters feel similar to me.
Yes.
Like Hugh Jackman's character makes that lamp thing that has the stars or whatever, and he's constantly kind of like fanning the flames of his kid's imagination, but he's also constantly stepping away, and to me, I think I've mentioned on the show before, I'm pretty sure I did, there's like a distinct line between fantasy and imagination. Like fantasy is used to escape, imagination is used to engage.
Yeah.
And both, I think the dad in this movie's name was Rex.
Yeah.
Both Rex and Barnum are using it because they don't like their lives. So they're trying to escape versus, hey, let's create something that actually helps us engage with life more. It's like they're trying to run away. And I at least in my work, I work a lot with addicts, I see a really, really strong correlation with fantasy and addiction.
Yeah.
Because I don't like my life. I want away from it, and I'm looking for ways to escape it through fantasy, but also through numbing up and self-medication and that kind of thing. And her dad in the movie was an alcoholic.
Yeah. And you could see by the time as she gets older, there's also that scene where she comes in and he wants her to stay because she's ready to leave, and he's like, no. I think he's trying to promise her again that he's gonna have it built, and she's like, she's like, Dad, that's never gonna happen. And I think that scene's a big, just kind of like that aha moment of like, she doesn't want to live in the fantasy anymore.
Why do you think the dad was so opposed to the kids leaving? Because I think it was her older sister literally has to have friends come with a car, have the door open long enough for her to jump in and then tear off. Like she had to escape from there. And then even when Jeanette was leaving, it wasn't just as easy as just saying goodbye and walking out the door. Like at one point, she'd been saving money in a piggy bank. Dad takes all the money before she knows it. Why do you think Dad was so opposed to that?
Yeah, I think I think it was fear, and I think a lot of ways those roles got reversed, and I think his kids, and I know the movie doesn't go into like too much detail of that, but my guess is that his children were meeting a lot of his needs, emotional needs.
So he had a I'm working on a project right now on anxiety. And so I've been reading about separation anxiety and how it occurs most often in kids. And it's the fear of the loss of an attachment figure. So maybe like that relationship got upside down. And since he was depending on them to meet needs, he had a fear of losing them as if they were a primary attachment figure. Huh. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So what do you think was up with Mom?
Yeah. I know, because they don't really get into her story as much. Yeah, and I guess Mom had her own abandonment
Do you
story.
think Mom was go with the flow? Like, I mean, I know at one point Mom had the kids in the car. Mom's name's Rosemary, I think. Mom had the kids in the car, like we're leaving. And then Jeanette walks inside the house. Dad's laying on the ground in the house smoking. And like she ends up getting Dad and then coming with. But for some reason at that point, Mom was like, maybe her and Dad were in a fight. But like she was going to take the kids. But for the most part, she and Dad are kind of, I don't know.
Yeah. And I
Rolling with
think
each
there's
other?
that one scene where she, I think she talks about how when she was younger in painting, I don't know if her parents approved of like her art. And I think Rex, the dad, I don't know if they were first started dating and he like hung the paintings everywhere. So I think she felt really accepted.
Her mom never hung her art up, and oh man, it kind of reminds me of in The Office when Pam has her art show and like a couple people from the office come in and kind of pick on it. And even her boyfriend comes in and she's like, hey, I showed up. All right, I'm leaving. But Michael, the boss, comes in and like wants to buy one. He falls in love with it so much. And it just met this need in her.
Yeah.
So maybe it's the same kind of like she just felt validated
Yeah.
and that just earned her loyalty, love,
Yeah.
question mark.
Yeah. And how she feels and how she views love.
Oh, how do you think she views love?
Well, I definitely think, that it just, it just seems like that family was chaos.
Yeah.
And so maybe those two got merged together. Like chaos feels like love.
How do you think Dad viewed love?
That is a really good question. Almost more in like a codependency way. How did he?
Because it doesn't seem like he views love as, strangely enough, always being together, because he would disappear for times, days at a time or whatever. He came back to the house after being gone for 3 days. I think it had a giant gash on his shoulder from saying he got into a fight with the mountain and the mountain won.
Yeah.
Whatever that meant.
Yeah. And then there's that scene. I thought it almost is more disturbing than the fire, but you can tell he's trying to like fight his addiction and stop alcohol. And he asks his kids, like, if I ask for a drink, don't let me have it.
Yeah.
And then there's that scene where he's like yelling at her to get her.
And he tries to basically go cold turkey. He has his wife tie him to a bed upstairs. And he's just trying to really white knuckle it. And at one point she walks up and he's like telling her to get him some bourbon or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, if it's not, I don't know, like, how did he view love? Because if it's not closeness or time, what was it?
I think almost, and I wonder if you could even, even call it that. It was more like, I feel like the dad was more like, how do I survive? Or just that view of love is when people take care of me. But I don't think he could really reciprocate it. I don't think either parent could reciprocate it.
He does have moments, though, where he really sees Jeanette. and really leans in
Yeah.
and meets a need. Like that night they're spending in the desert, and she wakes up and she sees a Joshua tree or something blowing in the wind and thinks it's a monster. He like wakes up and starts not just constructing a story about what it is, but in the story making her the hero and equipping her to conquer the monster. And like, you know, he really does in certain moments like go way above and beyond what you would think a person of his functioning would be capable of. And also, it's like a pendulum. And also, that thing swings way in the other way, too, where there's these moments of him just like taking and like stomping on them. And I don't think he ever physically abuses them, but like enables his mom to do it. And like, I mean, takes Jeanette's money and takes them away from situations that they're finally enjoying and growing in. And
And I can only imagine how confusing that is for Jeanette and her siblings. Yeah, because that one scene when they are in the desert, and I think she is really upset about her scars, and he just tells her that they're beautiful, and but then, like you were saying, he can swing back the other way and take their money. So
what did he say? He said it's evidence that we have a fire in our belly and that we're passionate and
and
we can't contain it. And
And I have watched and listened to interviews from the author, and she talks about her parents a lot, and she'll say that what helped her was, and I think that one of the benefits of that fantasy is her dad would always tell her that she could be anything that she wanted. And so I think that really helped her, because in a lot of ways it helped her dream big. So
I don't feel like that was a part of the movie. It felt like Dad really fought against the kids. It was almost like Dad wanted there to be a ceiling, and he was okay with them being whatever as long as it didn't go past that ceiling.
Yeah.
And maybe the ceiling was him. Maybe he didn't want them to go past where he was at. But then once they started to go past that, which was even something as simple as leaving the family, it was like he went into, this is not okay, I'm going to shut this down, you know. And and I think that just goes back to that pendulum. Like, it just felt like there were these times where he really knew his girl and really spoke to something deep in her heart, and other times where he just like kicked that heart away.
Yeah, there was a lot of that push-pull. Like, go out and explore, but then I want you to...
Do you think there was some, like, borderline kind of, like, come here but go away?
Yeah, I definitely... I would definitely say
certainly attachment stuff.
Yeah, definitely attachment stuff. And just that confusion of not making sense of his own history. And then what we don't make sense of, we repeat. So a lot of it, I think it was just, he loved his kids, but a lot of it, I think their parenting was just based out of ignorance and not knowing.
Which is so strange, because it felt like he was so smart,
Mm-hmm.
and not in like a BS way.
Yeah.
Like, not in a, I'm just spouting off nonsense, but like he knew constellations.
Mm-hmm.
He knew all kinds of facts, which who knows where he got any of that from. I'm not even totally sure. He kept repeating he had been in the Air Force. I'm not totally sure that was real. Mainly just because they didn't show any proof. Like, they never showed an old uniform or a picture of him.
Yeah.
He just kept repeating it.
Yeah. And
he was a con man. I mean, there were times he included the kids in a grift to, like, con people out of money, or even, you know, when Jeanette was in the hospital at the beginning from the burn, they went in and, like, stole her out of the hospital to avoid paying the bill, and included his son. He had his son walk in and flop around on the ground screaming and crying to distract the nurses and the doctors so he could steal her. So, I mean, he was a con man.
Yeah. Yeah, and it made me also sad of, like like there's that one scene where the doctors, I think there is a social worker that comes in, but and the movie didn't go into this in detail, but of like, was there any other adults that tried to like help those kids, help her and her siblings? But then I thought it probably was hard even if they tried, because they were always moving around.
Yeah, it didn't feel like that mom and dad let them get too close to other adults.
Yeah.
You know, because even when they did settle in a place for any length of time, the kids never really left the, I guess, quote unquote house. Because sometimes it was a house, sometimes it was the car, sometimes it was whatever. They never really allowed the kids' worlds to get bigger until the kids made them bigger by leaving. One thing that it seems like happened with the kids, to me, at least with the three sisters, is that at a certain point they had had enough and there's emotional cutoff. Do you think that that's always an inevitability when trauma is present?
Yeah, I would say I think so, because I mean, our brains do it for us, whether we want to do it or not. We either, go into that fight, flight, or freeze. So I think they had to for survival.
So it's a survival instinct? Yeah. Do you think it's possible for somebody living in, and I'm thinking of kids in specific, like for somebody living in a family where trauma is present, is there a way for the family to remain together?
You mean if they're like removed?
Is there a way for the kid to get what they need without being removed?
It depends how open the parents are. Yeah, because a lot of times when a kid comes into counseling, that sometimes, not always, a parent might have the view of fix my kid, like they are having a problem and they're the issue, but
symptom bearer.
Yes, but the child is always the symptom of something bigger going on.
And they never like to hear that.
Yes. No. Yes.
Kid's the client, fix the kid. Whoa.
Yeah. But then I work with some great families where the parents really do want, to know a different way of parenting and really do want the help and are open to feedback. Those are really fun to work with.
Yeah. I want to talk about Jeanette's fiance. And I keep looking at the IMDb page because I'm so bad at character names. And so David, who was Schmidt on New Girl. So I think David was around for the whole movie. I don't remember if they were living together at the beginning or not.
I think they were.
Yes, because he says something about why you still got all your stuff in these boxes. Throughout the course of the movie, it seems like that David is really trying to engage in her family on her family's level. Like he is in some kind of finance. Her dad keeps calling him an investment banker. I don't know if that's what he is, but he does something with money. And they go to the building that her parents are squatting in to have dinner. And, he is really nervous. David is, sweats through his shirt. Like she says something about pointing it out. He's like, don't point it out. It makes it worse. But like goes inside, meets all of them. And dad points it out and says, we're going to go in the other room and get you another shirt or something like that. And when they come out, dad had offered him a drink. They had been drinking and they're disagreeing about something. And then dad says, we're going to settle it with an arm wrestling match. And he's like, no. But alcohol is present and the family system is present and is like egging it on. So he ends up saying, yeah, I'll arm wrestle to see who's right. And when they start arm wrestling, it's looking, I think when the camera's pulled back, it's really looking like Dad's going to win. But then Jeanette, who is trying to kind of like fight this situation by like, no, this isn't right. And then really while the arm wrestling match is going on, she's kind of standing back, and the other members of the family are like, I guess cheering it on, like egging it on, like, yeah, get him, win. You know, Jeanette clicks into that. Like she gets sucked into that and starts like angry eyebrows and like yelling for David to like beat Dad. And then you kind of see that David is like toying with the dad. Like he's kind of giving it to him. Then he clicks in and wins. And of course, Dad can't accept that. So, left-handed rematch. And Jeanette's like, no, we're not going to do that. And David says, I'm ready for anything you can give me. And Dad just sucker punches him in the nose and breaks his nose. Well, I thought you said you're ready for anything I can give you. And like, they have to leave. And there's this weird passive-aggressive rejection that's happening. Dad's like rejecting David, but not saying that he's doing it. And says something along the lines to Jeanette as they're walking out the door about her boyfriend. And she says, he's not my boyfriend, he's my fiance. And she had not said that because she knew Dad wouldn't approve. Do you think that that's just out of the family's enmeshed, we deal with us, anybody who's not us is against us? Do you think it's out of something like that? Is Dad insecure and he sees that David can give her something that he can't? Like,
Yeah, I think it's all of those things. And the fact that he's also like losing connection with her, you know, even more so. Like first it was that move to the city and now she's dating someone. So now almost like she really doesn't need him.
Yeah, and she's like dressing different too, which maybe feels like since she's presenting different, maybe feels like her identity is no longer in the family.
Yeah.
So like a more of a separation.
Yeah. And I think her choosing to live life a different way is changing up the family dynamics.
So homeostasis is trying to kick in?
Yeah.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah, that does feel like something that he would have done with the kids, you know, so, oh man, this outside presence is coming in trying to stabilize this. I better shake the tree. I think something that confused me was she leaves with him and they continue on in their relationship. They're having an engagement party. Mom and Dad show up. That blows up. But Dad keeps saying stuff like, this is not you. You know, this is not who you are, blah, blah, blah. And then later on, whatever it is that David does, he has her come with him to a dinner with a potential client or something. And at that dinner, they're like schmoozing. And somehow or another, her parents come up, and she had said towards the beginning to somebody else a lie about her dad is working on a different way of burning coal. It's going to revolutionize, you know, which just seems like it's like shame, and she's trying to cover whatever. But at that dinner, David, the couple that they're having dinner with, asks her about her parents, and David says that lie for her. Which to me, I think at first seemed like he's still trying to speak the language. He's trying to like connect into her story, her system, her way of being. But like, I don't know. She ends up leaving David and not staying with him, or at least the movie implies that, because at the end they're having Thanksgiving dinner and he's not there. That just didn't make any sense to me, because it seems like her journey is one of differentiation away from the family, and yet her dad says, this isn't you, and then she steps further outside of it. Does she take a step back towards the family? to lessen her differentiation. Like, it seems like she rejects a part of this new self that she built.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't get that.
Yeah. And my thought was maybe she swung the other way and was living a life that wasn't truly her, or maybe she didn't know who she was quite yet. I got the impression of, like, during that time of her life, she was like running completely away from her story to the point where she would lie about her story, almost like she didn't do the work yet to integrate both, like, the life that she wanted as an adult and her childhood.
Yeah. I was listening to a podcast a couple of days ago, and I think it was Brene Brown on the Tim Ferriss show. And at some point, she talked about in the big book from AA, there's the 12 steps and there's the 12 promises, which are basically like, hey, if you follow the 12 steps, you'll get these, this is the result of following 12 steps. And one of them is the promise of neutrality, which is if you follow the 12 steps in sobriety, you will no longer be running to alcohol, but you'll also no longer be running from it. You'll just be still, and alcohol will be over there, and you will have a neutral feeling towards it. And it reminds me of, like, some of my work, when I was much younger, I had a lot of anger towards my dad. And I know I would say it out loud. I think sometimes I would think it inside, which if I'm saying it out loud, it was inside. But I think sometimes it was more saying it out of bravado, but it was also real. That a lot of my life at that point was driven, like, I just want to be the opposite of my dad. Which I was telling myself at the time was me becoming intentionally all of these things that I didn't see in my dad. No idea that it still meant I was being controlled. Not being controlled actively by my dad, but by my issues with my dad. I was trying to run from him, which still meant I had stuff that was attached, stuff that I still needed to work through. And I think that, it seems like maybe that's what was going on with her, was that, she just hadn't achieved the neutrality of, she was no longer in the system, so she wasn't running to, like, being actively controlled by, but she was just thinking, what's the opposite of my family? I'm going to do that without even knowing, what do I want? What do I like? Who am I? Maybe that was it.
Yeah, and maybe it was because it just reminded me, too, of that scene where, she has to unpack the boxes. Almost like, in a way, she's emotionally still running. Like, she might be physically in the same spot. And I think her dad, Rex, I think he saw himself in her a lot of, like, this is almost in his way of, don't end up the way I was. Like, this is not who you are.
Which he kind of says when I don't know if that's when he's on his deathbed. He's really sick and he can't get up. He kind of says that.
Yeah.
Ish.
But I think because I think the whole movie, he wasn't living in his true self. So I think him kind of trying to get her to stop doing that when he was like, this is not who you are. Almost like trying to tell her what he wished he could tell himself and do himself.
I hate that it came so late, though.
Yeah.
There was also a part, I don't know, halfway into the movie, you meet Dad's mom, you meet Grandma. And the first time you meet her, they're at the door, and she says something like, oh, thanks for letting me meet my grandkids before I die. So there's some, like, passive-aggressive sarcasm kind of stuff evident there. But then they're eating at the dinner table, and her brother, Dad's son, spits out some green beans or something, and she hits him. And then Jeanette speaks up with that. And there's very clearly, like, which is so strange to me. I guess this is like the oh shoot, what's the math thing called? A equals B, B equals C, so A equals C. Transitive property. It's like a transitive property of power dynamic. Like grandma clearly has power over dad, and the first time she's meeting the grandkids, she starts exerting it over them. You know, because when Jeanette speaks up about her hitting whatever the son's name was, she like tells her to shut up or she'll get it next or something. And then at some point they drop all the kids off with her because mom and dad are gonna go to another state again or something. And she walks in to find grandma sexually abusing her brother.
Mm-hmm.
And she like confronts her, tells her to stop or whatnot, and grandma hits her. And then the other two sisters show up and they all jump grandma, which I think I literally jumped up and was cheering in my living room at that, because I feel like so many times in these movies you just see, especially with children, helpless children, just getting like, I'm going to use the word overpowered, but that doesn't necessarily mean physically at all times, even relationally. And so I liked seeing them fight back. I liked seeing that fire come out. And then I guess that might have been her dad's brother who was living with grandma came in and like pulled them off. They don't really ever, he never speaks. They never say who he is. Like, I guess it was a brother or something, but somebody came in and pulled him off. But you know, you just, and I think through that experience with grandma, Jeanette kind of pieces together that dad was probably abused by her too. She also finds, I don't know what it is, a journal entry, a poem, something that dad had written where he's, you know, she just kind of says the line that dad wrote, it's tough to breathe when you're drowning in shit. And kind of, you know, sees, oh, dad was really unhappy here and was probably abused. And I think that's the first time that we kind of get clued in that maybe that's what dad's running from, like, which is so strange because it seems like that's getting repeated in them. But dad is fighting. It's like dad doesn't see that connection at all. He had to run, but he doesn't want his kids to run. Which, I mean, how could you want your kids to run? But like, he just hasn't pieced that together.
Yeah, there's a lot of layers in this movie.
Yeah. Yeah. So the movie ends with her, I guess, not living in the city because she's in a house. Although there's parts of the city with houses, like Queens House, but like it doesn't seem that that's what it is. And the fam comes over for Thanksgiving. She's got a big old table set. Brother has a wife and a kid. 2 sisters are there. Mom's there. Dad's gone. And as they're sitting there talking, she starts crying and just says how she's very thankful and that kind of thing. Do you read that as like she found her true self, that she found what she was looking for? Because that's where I really got confused, because it seemed like she was happy with David, but then she ditched him. And then now she's right back, or at least if she's not back in the family system, the family is together at that table at that time.
Yeah, I know it doesn't really give you a lot. I think it's kind of open-ended there. Yeah, but I took it as she's made peace with her story. Yeah, and I took it also as she's moved outside of the city. But yeah, I took it as she's made peace. And I looked at it as more like happy tears.
Yeah, I think I got that. The movie didn't feel resolved to me. It just felt like she made a left turn out of the story that she had been writing. Yeah. And we were still at the beginning of whatever that turn was producing.
And I think I cheated by reading the book. And
does the book reveal something different at the end? Or?
Yeah, I don't remember the exact ending, but I think it's there's more closure than the movie. And I've also watched interviews by her. So I think that added more closure to it. But yeah, I could see how if you don't do either one of those things, how it just kind of seems confusing.
Mm-hmm. They have this like moment, this scene towards the end where her mom and dad had come at the engagement party to ask her to loan them $1 million so that, and that's not an exaggeration, that's the actual number that they said, so that they could buy this land that was her mom's father's in Texas, something like that. Apparently her mom's father had all this land. Her mom had a brother. He had half. She had half. Brother wanted to sell the land. $1 million was going to be how much it cost for his portion. So they came to ask her to get David to loan them that money, which she's like incredulous over because, of course, you know. But then in that conversation, she finds out that mom had this land the whole time. And she's like, wait, you've been sitting on $1 million our whole life?
Mm-hmm.
Like, there were times that we couldn't eat. And then her mom says something like, oh, I just learned you don't sell land. And it's just, I think that like my eyes turned red when I heard her say that. Like, they had been denied so many basic needs throughout their whole lives, and to learn that they literally could have been rich the entire time. And what's so strange is that mom and dad are still homeless at that point. It's so strange. But a short time later, mom comes to her to say dad's sick and he's dying. And when she's at that dinner with David and the client, she ends up saying she has to go. So she's running from the dinner to dad. And the scene keeps going between her in the present running and then her as a kid in the desert where she saw that tree in the middle of the night, and dad like spoke to her about her burns, and he constructs this story about a demon and gives her a weapon to fight the demon, and then her and him go charging to go conquer the demon. And it keeps flashing between her in the present running to dad and her in the past running with dad. And I think that's really, to me, the best example in this movie of this weird tangle between trauma and love and care and neglect and enmeshment and differentiation and love and, I don't know about hate, love and hurt. I'll say that. That's what it is, yeah. And how it's all tied up together, and it's all really messy. But that scene to me, that's what showed it, because it's like this clear, oh my gosh, I love my dad, but also, oh my gosh, like, I literally have physical evidence on my body of abuse and neglect from him and my mom.
And what a hard thing to make sense of.
Yeah. Holy cow. What a hard thing to make sense of. I don't know if you can. Because that trauma doesn't make sense. I mean, even if you can understand, I would use air quotes to say why it happened, because there's no good why. But seeing that dad was abused by mom, you know, you kind of get, okay, so dad had some things tangled up with love and abuse. So, of course, he hands that down. Knowing why doesn't help resolve.
Not at all.
Yeah. That doesn't bring any healing. In fact, if anything, I almost think if it was me, that'd make me angrier. So let's like, I don't know. If you had somebody come into your office that was like Jeanette, at any age that we saw in the movie, what do you think you'd want to do? Where do you think you'd want to go?
I am a huge fan of brain spotting.
Really?
I don't know if you're familiar with.
Yeah. Your partner Melanie talked a lot about it. Yeah.
I got her into it first.
Nice. Okay. Now, did you come from an EMDR background as well and go that way?
No, because at the time I was working with kids, and I and I went to the first EMDR training, but then I was like, how am I going to do this with kids? And I know there's a kid protocol, but I was like, it doesn't seem like it would be really feasible. I'm sure there's people that do EMDR with kids all the time. But for me, I was just like, I don't know. There was a whole like tapping a kid on their back and I was like, it wasn't for me.
Felt unnatural.
Yeah, it felt unnatural. And I'm like, I don't know if I could do this. And I forget how I found out about brain spotting. And then I'm a big believer in like, if I'm going to do this with a client, I better have tested this out on myself first. So I did my own personal work with brain spotting and did a lot of inner child work through that and just had just amazing experience with that. So I think with Jeanette, I would love to be able to facilitate that for her, almost going back to her inner child and working through with like meeting those needs that weren't
some reparenting
work. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, clearly it would be a very big journey to walk back through that with her. Let's shift gears a bit. Tell me something that your clients have taught you.
I think I learned so much from them, but I think probably the best lesson that I've learned from them is being present. Like, I can work with some kids that have gone through a lot, especially doing school-based therapy and community mental health. I worked with a lot of kids that were still in the hard place. And just watching them be in session, being so present and being able to like play and be in that moment. Meanwhile, knowing later on they might go home and it might be pretty scary at home. Just the value of being present and in the moment, and also how to play. I think by the time we reach adulthood, we forget how to play. So I always jokingly say,
what do you think does that? What falls out of us that we need to be able to do that?
I don't know. I just think our like culture of being busy, and then I don't think technology helps, because I think kids are forgetting how to play pretty young. I had a middle schooler recently that she's not allowed to have a phone, which is kind of awesome. And she just said, I'm just sad because no one plays anymore. So I think some of our teens and tweens are kind of coming out of that a little bit early. But yeah, the little ones still have that, like, just want to play. So I think they've really taught me to be present and in the moment.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Tell me something that you do to take care of yourself.
Yes. That is a hard balance. Hard balance. Work-life balance is hard. And I think I'm still learning that balance. But I think my favorite thing to do to take care of myself is really, if I'm around people I love and feel loved by, I feel like that really pours into me. Connection. And I always say, like, my favorite thing to do is just having coffee with a friend. I'm like, if I could do this for a living, I would be like a millionaire. So I think
you kind of do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
right. So I just love being with people I care about. And also another thing that helps me take care of myself is practicing saying no, which is hard for my personality type. And sometimes I don't even say yes because I feel like I have to. I'll say yes because it sounds like a great idea at the time. And then I'm like, wait, my calendar is really full. So learning to pause before I give an answer to something.
Yeah. This might be too personal. So like, definitely say it if it is. But I'm thinking, we've talked so much about you being a 2, and it's kind of natural for you to focus on others. with saying that a big way that you take care of yourself is being with people you love and that connection, is it ever a struggle that even in those moments to like seek to get your needs met instead of focusing on theirs?
Yeah. Ooh, that is a good question. No, I think I could answer that. I think after because I always joke, like the first couple of times I went to therapy, I literally had my therapist had to give me a needs list, and I was like, oh my God. It was just like a aha moment of like, oh my gosh. Like, I'm pretty good about naming feelings, but I was like, oh man, sometimes I can't even label what I need. So I think learning that and recognizing my own needs more, and just I have some great people in my life who they've done their work too. And so just getting more comfortable in those moments to like ask for what I need, and then it's more of a give and take and not a one-sided of we're having coffee because I'm helping
but
you.
also to have people that really know you,
Yeah,
who have the permission to kind of call stuff
Yeah.
out, like that helps.
yeah, and also where I am letting them get to know me. So
Yeah, I think that's a big, I think vulnerability is really easy to understand sometimes as letting other people bring their real self, and even easy to understand as a curated, like I'll give you what I'm comfortable giving you about me, but there is that element of letting the people who've earned it, like we know can steward it well, letting them into all of the mess.
yes,
Like really pulling the curtain back and letting them see the stuff.
yeah,
And I think our shame like fights that.
oh yeah,
Yeah. What if they saw this? Would they still want to be around? Would they cast me out? That kind of thing.
yeah. And where mine gets a little tricky is I tend to be more of like emotional perfectionist. Like I don't, like I'm good.
Yeah.
I don't get upset. I'm good. So just letting safe people see that.
Yeah. Do you let yourself get upset with safe people?
I think I would say recently, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, within the past couple of years.
Yeah. Okay.
But I have to fight the urge to be like, I think my brain's like, nope, you can reach out to them later when you're good. So I have to fight that urge.
Almost like, so this is something that I tell my clients, and I think as somebody that works with kids, you'll appreciate this, because every time I say it, I always say I need to get this prop for it. But I'll notice that sometimes if they're trying to say something hard, right, they get bottlenecked. They can't get it out. So I'll say, listen, you got a tub of Legos in your head. You don't have to sort them by color and then build stuff out of them before you let it out.
Oh, I like that visual.
Just dump it out on the floor and let's sort through it together. And I always think in that moment, I need a tub of Legos in here.
Yes.
So I can actually do it in the moment. But like, do you feel like your tendency is, I will let you guys see the mess once I have it cleaned up. So all the components are still there, but now they're neatly placed rather than just dumping out the Legos and...
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel the same way a lot of times. Yeah.
I'll send you some Legos. I got a ton. I love that visual.
So let's say somebody was listening to our conversation today and they just think to themselves, oh man, Leah's great. Love to connect with her. I think that, me or my kiddo would love to see her as a client. How can they get a hold of you?
So probably the best way to get a hold of me is my website. And my website is leahlennoxcounseling.com. And I have a submission form on my website where they can leave their information, and then I will contact them back.
Nice. And I know that Melanie plugged are you guys an agency, a collective?
Yeah, so it is a collective. Everyone is, it's Integrative Therapy of Nashville, and we really thought of the idea of we love to collaborate with other people in the profession, and we wanted that. It's twofold. We wanted therapists to be able to get their needs met, where they're collaborating with other clinicians, we're staffing cases with each other, kind of really pouring into each other so we can go pour out into the community. And then we wanted clients to feel like a place. My dream has always been to do therapy in a house where people felt like they were coming to a safe place that felt like home. And I know home could maybe not always be a great term for people, but almost a little reparenting there. So, and we wanted to be able to have almost all your needs met in one stop. So we have nutritionists, we have people with that see couples, but we wanted everyone to keep their autonomy. So we're not an agency. We're all independent practitioners, but we just make time to collaborate.
But maybe with a common mission.
Yeah.
And you recognize in each other resources that could help everybody else.
Yeah, and it's perfect because you know, Melanie will see women, and then she comes downstairs and she's, you know, and then I'll start seeing their little kiddo. And a lot of times, you know, if I'm working with a kiddo, I tell the parents, I'm like, you have to come here anyway and sit in the lobby. Why don't you take time for you?
I think that's something that she talked about when she was here that just seemed like the biggest duh, and I loved it so much, was you guys having the ability that if the kiddo has a need and comes in and is seeing somebody, that maybe mom and dad can be seeing somebody at the same time at the same location. And I just thought, man, in today's world where mom and dad have to act as like Uber drivers and get one kid to soccer and the same time the other kids at baseball across town and all this, to have the resources to meet multiple needs of multiple people at the same location at the same time. Holy cow, that's like game changing.
Yeah. And I always tell parents, I'm like, the best gift you can give your kiddo is to make sense of your own story.
Oh yeah. Process your shame so you don't transfer it.
Yes.
Yeah. Leah, thank you so much for
welcome.
coming. It has just been the biggest
fun.
pleasure, and I'm so glad to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too.
Nice. Hey everybody. This episode, this conversation that I got to have with Leah has been on my mind. I think at this point I'm like, I recorded that episode about 2 weeks ago from when I'm recording this wrap up, and this movie, The Glass Castle, is still making my brain itch. And I think that the conversation that Leah and I had, I feel like barely scratched the surface of what can be mined from this movie, with the intermingling of trauma and love and attachment bonding, and how all of those things affect a person's growth and development and ability to move forward, and inspiration or motivation on doing their own personal work. And you know, this is one where I feel like I could almost see like a multi-part series on, or maybe even, you know, one episode where, you know, me and a certain guest talk about it, and then a separate episode where me and a different guest talk about the same movie, because I just feel like it was very interesting and did not provide it didn't provide a good like wrap up, or it didn't give me any closure. And so I'm just kind of left, I think, like I said, you know, my brain is just still itching a little bit from it. So you know, when Leanne came on at the end of the shows to help me wrap things up, I'd always ask her buy, rent, or pass for a particular movie. And with this one, I think, you know, if I was going to say buy, rent, or pass on it, I for sure would say rent. Absolutely would say rent. Because I just think so much can be mined from it. You know, so much could be learned, so many good discussions could be had. I'm not 100% that it would be one where I would want to watch it multiple times. So I don't know about buy. But I would say if you watched it and you liked it and you think you could watch it multiple times, I'd definitely say buy. But for me, I think maybe solid rent. I also want to mention again March the 3rd, the tornado that came through Nashville. If you are interested in making a donation or contributing in some way to help people recover from that loss, you can do so with the Community Foundation. I have a link to their page in the show notes that you can, if you're using the podcast app on an iPhone, you can swipe up. That'll get you to those show notes, and you can click that link and go over and help some people out as they're trying to recover. Thanks so much for joining me this week in the theater. I'll make sure I save a seat for you and a friend next week. Let's raise the lights, lower the curtain, and say that for this week, the theater is closed.